Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's Ag Forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions, your premier platform for real-time global insights. We're going to start off first here with 4 separate tropical systems we were watching over the weekend. And the image you see here is from Sentinel. This is a European satellite caught a high-resolution view of Hurricane Hanna just before it made landfall in southern Texas. Now, Hurricane Hanna rapidly intensified from a tropical depression over the weekend, sitting on top of very warm waters and a very low wind shear environment above it. And as you can see here, a very well-defined eye emerged as it passed just south of Corpus Christi. Now, as this hurricane went south of Corpus Christi, we did see quite a bit of wind damage. This is an estimate from the RTMA data telling me what it was looking like in terms of maximum wind gusts. We do see a lot in here in the 70 to 95 mile an hour range and possibly faster than that. We'll wait to get the official data in from the weather stations that were down here to see how strong these winds were, but some damage right here along the coast, including some storm surge in some of the deeper bays. Total precipitation amounts were quite high as well, and remember, this part of southern Texas was in drought going into this, but the farther south you go here down to the southern tip, you can see rainfall amounts ranging between 6 and 10 inches with, I say lighter amounts, but they were up to 3 to 4 inches that were north of Corpus Christi, even up toward Houston, getting back around here to the southern parts of Louisiana and Mississippi. Some of the rainfall on the northern edge of this as it came through, producing some locally heavy rainfall amounts. The second system was Douglas. Douglas went just north of the Hawaiian Islands here, and you can still see very well-defined eye wall and structure as of the evening hours on the 26th. Very impressive to see a system survive this long over toward Hawaii. Hawaii is, believe it or not, very rarely hit by hurricanes, and this one did skirt right along the northern coast here, which is good for Hawaii. You would never want one to go south and hit the islands, because remember, it's always the right-hand side of the hurricane that is the strongest. So if the hurricane is moving in this direction, it would be this side that would have the fastest winds and greatest storm surge. From there, though, I want to take you to our latest satellite animation here. It's about 48 hours worth of infrared data, and we were talking about Gonzalo going through the Lesser Antilles, and you can see the really disorganized convection that is now here in the Caribbean. That was the remnants of Gonzalo. And at this point, we kind of backed off on being overly concerned, I would say, about what's left of Gonzalo's convection trying to make it into the Gulf of Mexico, but I'm still going to watch that pretty carefully. Well, system number 4 is brewing right over here, and this open tropical wave here has quite a good chance at becoming what could be a pretty strong hurricane here in the near term. So let's take a look at what we're talking about there by going straight to our kind of spaghetti map here, which shows us all of the different ensemble members from the European model and the projected path of that system. Now, at this point in the week, things are a little too early to pin anything down, so let's just talk about the general path of this particular system here. And as we kind of just look this one out, we're going to be watching again for what the mid-level relative humidity and dust conditions look like, especially in the northern side of this, and how wind shear is going to play a role, but we certainly know the ocean temperatures are plenty warm. Now, when you look at this map, what it's showing you here is the tracks of low-pressure systems, so not just tropical, but even extratropical. And in a few moments, we're going to be talking about what we're seeing right in through here. There's a pretty interesting shortwave coming out of California today that could be snaking through the central United States all the way over to the Carolinas and therefore producing some very heavy rainfall. We're going to talk about that in just a few moments. But right now, the National Hurricane Center has given this wave a 90% chance of formation, which means becoming a tropical depression or stronger. And I showed you the European model guidance. This is what the GFS is currently pinning down. And one of the reasons why it's got this track that looks something like this is because our subtropical high pressure system that's been sitting out here in the open Atlantic is expected to stay there. So with the flow around it like that, this could help turn this system and keep it away from the coast. But please, this is so far away in terms of time that it could possibly impact the United States that we cannot be certain about anything with it. I just want to let you all know we're going to be watching it very carefully. Now, this is an interesting piece to all of this. Some research over the weekend I was looking at because of just tipped off from a few folks talking about it on Twitter. It turns out that the time period where the Mad-Julian oscillation stayed over here in phase 1 and 2 is so far over 60 days. Now, why that's important is because of the map that's over there on the right. You see, this allows, if we just want to think about this in very simple terms, this allows wherever you see the greenish, bluish shading, that allows the atmosphere to exhaust upward very easily. Wherever you see these warmer colors, this is where the atmosphere is very suppressive in terms of vertical motion. Now, why I bring this up is we've had so far pretty active tropical season this year in the Atlantic, while the Pacific has really been shut down because of the MJO getting stuck in phase 1 and 2. Now this week, midweek in my long-range outlook, we will be discussing what it means to see if the MJO is finally going to move through phases 3 and 4. We've seen a lot of back and forth on where the models are taking the MJO, but if it moves it into the Indian Ocean and at some point into the Pacific, this will change a lot for global tropical cyclone development. But as it stands, with the MJO getting stuck there, now look at this. This is a really cool bit of data here that comes out of Colorado State. The North Atlantic Ocean, is currently sitting at nearly double its accumulated cyclone energy. That's just a metric we keep track of that tells us total energy content of these tropical systems. But look at for example, the Northwest Pacific where we have typhoons. We're basically sitting, what would that be, right about 11% of our total ACE, and that's primarily been because the MJO has been stuck in that configuration that's been in for so long. So that will be an interesting piece moving into tropics that could change momentum transfer out of the tropics. It'll change our pattern for the month of August and September should it come out, and it's certainly going to impact tropics. So we're going to keep an eye on that, and we're going to talk about it in Wednesday's long-range discussion. I now want to come back to the U.S. specifically here and talk about precipitation. This map shows the last 30 days of precipitation in terms of percent of normal. Now remember, these are always 1 day old, so this is on the morning of the 26th. Now what I'd like to do for you is I want to remove everything that is above 50%. And what you're seeing now then is any region where the precipitation totals over the last 30 days have been less than half. And we can see over there in parts of the Ohio Valley getting over to the east coast to mid-Atlantic, down into the southeast, some pockets of drought. Southern Missouri, Arkansas, look at Texas, even parts of the high plains. But many that watch this video are right here in the heart of the Corn Belt, and you can see how dry things have been in Iowa. And this is if I make it down to 25%. So now you're only seeing locations that have received a quarter of their total rainfall over the last 30 days. And there are some pockets in here that have seen none. Well, why we talk about that was because at the end of last week, we were watching a frontal boundary that was going to be sliding through this region right here in the Corn Belt, potentially bringing in some precipitation. And the hopes was that it was going to get into parts of Iowa. But I'll tell you something, when I was teaching back at the University of Illinois, courses in atmospheric sciences, when we talked about drought, one of the phrases I taught my students was this phrase that came about after the drought of the 1930s. It's all signs fail in times of drought. And what that means is all signs of precipitation. And while we did get some much needed rainfall in parts of Iowa, you can see here that the heaviest precipitation was in parts of southeastern Nebraska, stretching through Kansas, and then in eastern Iowa. And outside of that, the southwestern monsoon was really cranked up, and widely scattered storms across the southern part of the United States, including parts of the Tennessee and Ohio Valley. I do want to keep a close eye over here on the west coast too. You'll see as this animates again, watch the thunderstorms popping up here in Nevada and California. That's going to be a piece to watch here in the coming days for this same region right here in the United States. I'll come back to that in just a few moments. So, total accumulated precipitation over the last 48 hours ending at 3 a.m. this morning. We've talked about Texas. You can see the widely scattered showers that are all across the rest of the south. There is kind of a gap in between here where that front was still moving, where we had very hot conditions, especially over there in parts of the Ohio Valley, but not much rainfall. But the southwestern monsoon combined with that front coming through, you can see heavy rainfall from Arizona clear up to Wisconsin and the UP of Michigan. In pockets, though, especially just in south central Minnesota, where we saw over the weekend extremely heavy rainfall out of a few thunderstorm clusters that went through that area. But notice the hit or miss nature across the state of Iowa. But getting back through Kansas and Nebraska, some desperately needed rain did come through there, and that's a very important feature to be taking note of here. Okay, moving into this forecast, this is what the upper level flow pattern looks like this morning. We can see that the broader trough here that's moving over between the Hudson Bay and Great Lakes, but the feature I want you to watch is actually right here. This little shortwave sitting right in through this area. And here's why I want you to pay attention to it. You see, I'm going to animate for you from the operational European model where that little wave is going. So you saw the broader wave up here, south of Alaska, the second one between, the Great Lakes and the Hudson Bay. But I want you to keep your eye on this feature right here. So let's play this. We're going to pause it right there. You see that little wave, after giving us chances for storms over here in California, Nevada, and Oregon today, and some other risks as well we'll talk about in a few moments, sneaks under this broader ridge that goes through the Canadian prairies. It's right there. It doesn't look like much, but it's quite important. You see, as we then get into, this is now Wednesday morning, Wednesday afternoon, and getting into Wednesday evening, it's going to ride the backside of this trough and come snaking right here out of parts of Wyoming, straight down through parts of Nebraska, into Kansas and Missouri eventually. Now, where this eventually ends up, and even though we have good ensemble support out to the end of this weekend, where this eventually ends up will determine entirely where the northern and southern edge of the precipitation is going to be. And as that squeaks through there, so this is taking you all the way out to next Sunday, this will be critical to watch very heavy rainfall potentially in this corridor. Meanwhile, a sizable ridge builds in back into the west, and this is really going to change those temperature patterns across the western United States as well. So what do we have in our all hazards weather map today? Well, all of this that you see in through here is flood watch. We then go over to the west coast and the east coast and we see where the heat is. But here we also have a fire threat. And one of the reasons why is that over the next 48 hours, we could be getting winds gusting inside this section of the western United States that could be gusting 30 to at times maybe 50 miles an hour depending on topography. Meanwhile, much of the center part of the United States gets a little bit more still conditions, but you can see the stronger winds that are coming in here as well. So this is maximum wind gusts over the next 2 days, all added together, so you can see where the peaks are going to be. In addition to that, we will watch later on today this. What you're looking at here is from the European model showing you lightning flash density this afternoon and this evening. So we're kind of seeing where thunderstorms are going to be. So that shortwave today is going to be kicking off quite a bit of storms out here in the western United States. You can see the southwestern monsoon. You can see the position of the front that's squeaking through. And we can just see our normal convection happening down in parts of the southeast. Okay, from there, what I want to show you is our severe weather threat. We would call this a bit of a quieter week, but I expect to see quite a bit of thunderstorm activity. We just don't see large areas of slight to enhanced to moderate risk this week, mainly due to the upper level flow pattern being where it currently sits. But this is what I think we all wanted to see. This is from the Weather Prediction Center, so this is National Weather Service data. You can see where that particular trough feature is going to be going. And as a result of that movement, there could be some very heavy rainfall between parts of Nebraska down to Oklahoma, and then through this corridor that runs through the mid-Mississippi River Valley over toward the mid-south, getting into Tennessee, Kentucky. Now, the kind of cruel part of this is depending on how far north it goes, we could cut off a lot of Iowa for meaningful precipitation of this. And again, you saw that as a region that desperately needs that precip. This is the operational European model. So you can see it once again, a little different color bar here, but you can see where the heavy precipitation is anticipated through the next week. So this goes out to next Sunday night. And then this is the GFS. Okay, still that same feature coming in through here, but this is what we're going to be watching. So the model's in decent agreement out to about 7 days. Now to show you it piecewise, let's watch these features come together. There's a shortwave sitting right here. There's also another shortwave like we talked about coming in through California, and here's the frontal boundary early this morning. So there were some widely scattered showers into this area early this morning. As we press play, let me take you back and show you these features. As we work our way into this evening, the frontal boundary stretches in through here, so chances for rain in through this area are relatively high. As we move forward, here it is. So there's going to be a feature right here, this short wave, combining on Tuesday afternoon with the second wave that's moving through the mountains here. And what's going to end up happening is you're going to see both of these features come together. So here's one, here's the other. Now, in the meantime, there is still going to be scattered storms out ahead of this. There's still plenty of moisture transport out of the Gulf, scattered storms. But what you're going to see is that going from Wednesday afternoon into Wednesday evening, getting into Thursday morning, afternoon, and evening, the first wave out ahead of it over Missouri, the second wave coming around the backside, the deeper trough in the upper levels is sitting, in this general vicinity. I'm sorry, not in through here, but it's sweeping through the northeast. Excuse me. So there's a bit higher pressure on the backside, so it's sweeping through the northeast. But watch what happens underneath that. Wave 1, wave 2, stretched right in through this area, and as a result, as it comes through Friday into Saturday, now into Sunday, there's the potential in this area through the weekend for some relatively heavy rainfall within a big area of higher atmospheric pressure building in behind this. So the exact position of this is going to we're going to have to watch each model update for the next few days to see how this comes through the mountains. If it shifts at all to the north, that changes the game for Iowa entirely. We're going to watch this very carefully, though. All right. From there, I want to show you the day 10 pattern, because both the GFS, which is on the left, and the European, which is on the right, honestly have very similar features to it. But when you look at that, okay, look at that pattern and then go straight to the precipitation. Go, wait a minute, why would the European for week 2 have much wetter conditions down south and up the east coast, while the GFS has a stormy pattern like the European does out of the Canadian prairies through the Ohio River Valley and through here? Why are there some similarities and some differences? Well, let me take you out now to the 8th, and these are the key differences. In the GFS ensemble, why it looks so dry down here in parts of the southern United States is because it's trying to build in a pretty big ridge here, and a second one there, really just keeping the whole flow of the jet stream pretty far to the north. Whereas the European model doesn't do that. It keeps one ridge here and brings in the pattern something a bit more like that. Therefore, much more precipitation in the southeast, all the way up the east coast. So these model differences, they've been quite maddening lately, to be honest with you, but we're just keeping a close eye on what these differences are and how they might play out. So we need to watch the model trends here throughout this week to see how week 2 is going to shape up in terms of precipitation across, well, much of North America, but especially in the southeast. To finish this up, let's talk temperatures in Ukraine. So this is temperatures in the United States first. This is today. We're looking at high temperatures in the numbers and the departure from normal in the color coding. So as we play this forward, we quickly get into Tuesday here. It's going to be a very hot start to the week in the Pacific Northwest, some of the hottest we've seen all year long. But we notice that around the midsection of the United States, it's going to be relatively on the cooler side of things here. Remember, this is the time period where that little shortwave's coming through, bringing in the clouds and precipitation. So while the west goes under the ridge and stays warm, especially in the Pacific Northwest, the midsection of the country cools off. Now, there is a deep trough off the northwest that tries to come in toward the end of the week, and you can see it trying to bring the temperatures back down here. But overall, this is a cooler pattern through the next several days here in the midsection of the country. Now that we've seen out to next Saturday, let's look at the longer range here. Got the GFS ensemble on the left and the European on the right. We just see that in the day 5 through 10 time period, which gets us out to the 6th of August, we see the warmth that's really across much of the western United States, with the cooler weather tucked away in the mid part of the country, maybe upwards of 3 to 4 degrees cooler than average during this time period in the midsection of the United States. Then as we get out here into the 10 to 15 day time period, honestly, the models, despite having those differences in the flow pattern beyond about day 13, still paint a relatively similar picture in terms of temperature anomalies. Some differences here, some subtleties in how far to the east this pattern has moved, but overall, a relatively similar picture as we work our way out here to the 11th of August. Last thing I want to talk about is Ukraine. So we got 3 graphics to show you over here. The 2 on the left deal with precipitation. So when you look at this, it's 180 days that we're looking at here. So we're going all the way back to February 6th. And anything that you see above that dashed line over there in the top left image shows us where things have been wetter than average. They went through a pretty long dry stretch right in through here that was in March into early April, but since June have really picked up quite a bit of precipitation. That's what the figure on the bottom shows too, is daily precip. What about their temperatures? Well, we can see that it was relatively cool throughout the month of May, so they didn't really jump off to a fast start, but a lot of heat here in June, and it has since cooled off in July. And to be honest, I think a lot of us know that if this would have been nearer to average, this would have been a pretty ideal setup for growing conditions here in parts of Ukraine. Now, over the next week, we're going to go on a bit of a roller coaster ride in terms of temperatures. So nothing sustained hot or cold. It's actually going to be quite a vigorous pattern. But we do see relatively dry conditions. This area right in through here is going to be relatively dry throughout this week. So it's only going to be western and far southeastern Ukraine that are shown up wet in the longer term. So with that bit of international perspective, I'm going to wrap it up right here and hope that you all have a great week. I look forward to giving you more updates this week. Until then, have a great one. Thanks.